She stood in the kitchen, barefoot on the cool tile floor, her hand resting on the refrigerator handle, and she couldn't remember why she was there. Not in the "what was I going to grab" sort of way, that little dance of aging she'd long grown used to, but in the quieter, lonelier kind. The kind where even the silence feels unfamiliar. The kind where the smell of coffee doesn't trigger comfort, only questions. The light was soft that morning, filtered through lace curtains she'd hung 20 years earlier, and never had the heart to replace. Outside, the leaves shimmered in gold, and the world continued as if nothing was missing. But inside her, something was. She tried to retrace her thoughts. Had she come for water? To feed the cat? Had she even fed the cat? She opened the fridge. Nothing stirred. She turned to the counter empty. Then to the kettle, still cool. Then, just above the light switch, taped to the wall, was a small square of paper. Not old, not yellowed. Neatly written in her own handwriting, but in a style she hadn't used in years, rounded, careful letters like she'd practiced in school. It said, "Breakfast is joy. Start there." She stared at the note. There was no memory of writing it. No memory of choosing that phrase. But something about it made her eyes sting. She sat down at the kitchen table, slowly, the chair creaking beneath her like an old friend sighing in recognition. She read the note again, whispered it under her breath. Breakfast is joy. And then she did something she hadn't done in weeks. She made toast. With raspberry jam. And while the bread browned, she pulled out a teacup she rarely used, one with tiny forget-me-nots dancing along the rim. She chose chamomile for comfort. Sat by the window. Ate in silence. Not thinking of what she'd forgotten, but letting herself be guided by the note. She didn't know why it was there. She didn't know when she had written it. But it had helped. It had held her. And that was enough. That morning, she opened a drawer and found a small stack of blank note cards. Next to them, a pen with blue ink. She held it thoughtfully, not with purpose, not yet, just the weight of it in her hand. Like a tool she'd forgotten how to use, but once loved. And as the light shifted through the trees and fell onto her table, she whispered to the stillness. If I can't always remember, maybe I can leave breadcrumbs for the version of me who will need reminding. She didn't know it then, but that note, the one she forgot she wrote, would be the first of many. It started with the fridge. That first note, breakfast is joy. Start there. Had clung to the cool white surface like a whispered reminder from someone she used to be. And though she couldn't remember writing it, she remembered how it felt to read it. That gentle guidance. That soft, unspoken kindness. So the next day, she wrote another. You love the smell of morning toast. And then one more, before bedtime. Your favorite mug is the blue one with the chip on the rim. It belonged to your sister. The notes became a ritual. Not hurried, not forced. Just little scraps of paper, written in careful blue ink, tucked into the corners of her day. She didn't rush them. Some days she wrote one. Some days none. Others, she would write 5, in a flurry of remembrance, as if her memory had opened a hidden drawer for just a moment, and she was gathering what she could before it shut again. At first, she placed them only where she needed them, the refrigerator, the pantry door, the bathroom mirror. But over time, they wandered. One found its way inside the sugar jar. Sweet things comfort you. Let yourself have one. Another she placed in her coat pocket. This is the coat you wore on your trip to Paris. You felt beautiful in it. And one she taped just above the light switch in the hallway. You're not afraid of the dark, just of forgetting where the light is. The hallway became her gallery of self. A quiet space where thoughts lived safely, even when her mind misplaced them. She began referring to it, in her mind, as the wall of notes. Not out loud, not even to her few visitors, but to herself in those small moments of stillness, brushing her hair, folding a dish towel, watching the kettle warm. She'd think, I'll add this to the wall. And then she'd do just that. Sometimes the notes were factual. Your son's name is Peter. He lives by the sea. You planted the rose bush in '93. It blooms in late May. Other times, they were like prayers. You have weathered storms before. This one will pass too. Your hands may tremble, but your heart remembers. One day, while dusting the bookshelf, she found a picture frame turned face down. It was a photo of her wedding day. She couldn't place the name of the man beside her. His face was familiar, kind. His smile reached his eyes. But his name drifted just out of reach. Her breath caught in her throat. The dusting cloth dropped to the floor. She sat down slowly and wrote a note. You once loved a man who made you laugh in grocery aisles. His name was Henry. You danced with him in the living room on Tuesday nights. She taped it to the back of the photo and set it upright again. That night, she placed a note near the bed. The world can feel strange in the morning. Start slow. Tea first. One deep breath at a time. And beside it, another. You are safe here. The notes multiplied, but not chaotically. They were orderly in their own tender way, like a garden grown by instinct rather than plan. She began choosing paper with soft edges, pastel colors, pinks, blues, creams. Sometimes, she added a sticker. A little flower. A tiny sun. It made her smile, even if she couldn't recall where the stickers came from. A neighbor came by one afternoon, dropping off soup and bread. She noticed the notes and asked gently, "Do you want me to help organize these?" Eleanor smiled, not dismissively, but gently, like a teacher with a child. "They are organized," she said. "They're just not in alphabetical order." The neighbor chuckled politely, though she didn't fully understand. But Eleanor didn't mind. Not everyone needed to. The notes weren't for visitors. They were for the woman who would wake up one morning and forget her favorite chair, forget which drawer held the spoons, forget why she had tears in her eyes when a certain melody played on the radio. They were for the version of herself who might not remember her own name, but might still recognize a phrase, a color, a kindness from long ago. Each note, a seed planted in hope. Each word, a tether to something once certain. Each sentence, a soft voice in the fog, saying, "You are still here. You are still loved. You are still you." And though she couldn't remember the past in its entirety, she was, in her own quiet way, writing herself into the present, one loving note at a time. It happened on a Tuesday. The morning had begun like any other. Eleanor woke to the sound of birdsong, faint but persistent, chirping just beyond the lace curtains of her bedroom window. There was a time, long ago, when she knew the names of those birds, when she would whisper them to her husband as they sat on the porch, watching the trees shift from season to season. But those names had been among the first to leave her. Quietly. Without warning. Like a guest who slips out of the party without saying goodbye. Still, she had learned to let those things go gently. This morning, she rose with the same rhythm she always followed. Robe first, slippers second, then the slow walk to the kitchen. Her hands moved with familiar grace, spooning tea leaves into the strainer, pouring water just before it boiled, setting the blue-rimmed cup on her favorite woven placemat. She buttered her toast and spread a thin layer of raspberry jam, always on the left side. That's what one of her notes said. Left side jam. You've done it that way for years. She didn't question it anymore. She trusted the notes. She trusted the quiet wisdom of her past self. The kitchen clock ticked in steady time, and the smell of warm bread filled the air. She sat at the table and looked at her hands. A small age spot had appeared near her thumb. She traced it absently, wondering if it had always been there, or if this was something new, a new landmark in a landscape she no longer fully knew. Then, her eyes drifted across the room. The mirror in the hallway. It caught the morning light just so, and in it a woman stood still. Eleanor rose and walked toward the reflection, her cup cradled in both hands. The woman in the mirror looked back, soft gray hair, a robe that hung loosely at the shoulders, lips parted slightly in thought. She looked gentle, kind even, but she didn't look familiar. Eleanor tilted her head slightly, as if the angle might shift her understanding. Who is she? She looked into her own eyes and searched for something solid to hold on to, a name, a memory, a simple string of letters. But there was only fog. The kind that didn't rush in with panic, but settled slowly, like mist on a quiet lake. She tried to say it aloud, her name. Nothing came. She stepped back, blinked, waited for the name to arrive on the tip of her tongue. It didn't. She set her tea down on the hallway table with trembling hands and steadied herself on the wall. Her breath became shallow, not from fear, but from a quiet ache, the ache of absence, of suddenly not being known even to oneself. The silence in the house seemed to grow louder. The ticking of the kitchen clock echoed faintly. Somewhere, the kettle let out a breath of steam. Then, her eyes found it, the note. It was a pale blue square, taped just beneath the light switch at eye level. It had been there for months, though she hadn't read it in weeks. Not since she still remembered without help. She reached for it with a hand that slightly shook. Your name is Eleanor. You were named after your grandmother, who loved lilacs. You have always loved lilacs too. Lilacs. A sudden image bloomed in her mind. A field behind her childhood home, filled with pale purple blossoms swaying in the breeze. Her grandmother's voice, soft and crinkled with age. The sound of laughter as she wove flowers into little crowns for Eleanor's hair. She whispered aloud, Eleanor. The name felt like a long-lost coat, warm, familiar, a little frayed at the edges, but hers. She repeated it again, firmer this time. Eleanor. She ran her fingers along the note. The ink had not faded. The words were still certain, even if she had not been. There was a kind of holiness in that, the way the past could still reach out and hold the hand of the present. Later that morning, she sat by the window, pen in hand, and wrote a new note on soft ivory paper. If you forget again, it's okay. You are still someone. You are still loved. You are still here. She folded it in half, gently, and placed it inside her coat pocket, the one she wore when she went outside, when the weather was nice and the sky felt wide. Because if it ever happened again, if the fog returned, if the woman in the mirror went unnamed once more, she wanted the future version of herself to have something to hold on to. A note. A whisper. A hand extended across time. That night, Eleanor sat quietly in bed, the lamp casting a soft glow on the note cards scattered across her nightstand. She read her name one more time before sleep took her, not because she had forgotten, but because she had remembered. And sometimes, remembering deserves its own kind of ceremony. The first time Eleanor forgot a face, it wasn't her own. It was a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of soft, sleepy day where time seemed to slow. Rain tapped gently on the window panes, a quiet percussion. The fireplace glowed, and the house smelled faintly of chamomile and wood polish. She had just finished placing a fresh note on the hallway wall, a simple one. You smiled today. It matters. As she stepped back to admire it, the doorbell rang. Eleanor rarely had visitors. Most of her friends had moved either away or on. The young woman from the church sometimes stopped by with groceries, and the neighbor's son mowed her lawn once a week. But unexpected guests had become rare, like snow in late spring. She walked slowly to the front door, bracing herself on the wall as she passed the framed photo of her wedding, the man in it still kind, still nameless. When she opened the door, there stood a girl. Or rather, a woman now, but Eleanor saw traces of the girl she might have once known. Late 20s perhaps. Chestnut hair pulled into a soft braid. Rain on her coat. A bouquet of lavender in her hand, wrapped in brown paper. Hi, the girl said, eyes wide with something between hesitation and hope. It's been a while. Eleanor blinked. The face was soft, familiar in the way a song is familiar when you've forgotten the lyrics. She searched the girl's features for clues, the tilt of her smile, the way she held the bouquet. I'm sorry, Eleanor said gently. You'll have to remind me who you are. The girl didn't flinch. Her smile didn't falter. Instead, she nodded, as if she'd expected this. I'm Anna, she said. You used to babysit me every Thursday after school. I'd stay until my mom got off her shift at the diner. A pause. Then a small laugh. You made me eat carrots. I hated them. You called me Firefly because I used to wear those light-up sneakers and dance around your living room. Firefly. Eleanor felt the word stir something deep inside her. A flicker. A hallway. A tiny girl twirling in mismatched socks. A faint memory of laughter echoing off the wallpaper. I remember, a little, Eleanor whispered. Anna stepped inside as Eleanor moved aside. She placed the lavender bouquet gently on the entry table, next to Eleanor's most recent note. The scent of lavender makes you feel safe. Anna noticed the note. She read it quietly, and when she looked up, her eyes were glassy with tenderness. "You still write these?" she asked. Eleanor nodded. "For the days when I lose parts of myself." Anna reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in worn cloth. "Then maybe you'll want this." She unwrapped it slowly, revealing a faded drawing, done in crayon and marker. A house, a tree, a woman in a blue dress with wild gray hair. Next to her, a tiny girl with light-up shoes and a crown of stars above her head. At the bottom, in a child's clumsy script, "To Miss Eleanor, you are my favorite person." Eleanor stared at the drawing for a long time. Something behind her eyes stung, not pain, but warmth breaking through. "I kept it all these years," Anna said softly, "because you made me feel known, safe, like I mattered." Eleanor's voice trembled. "I'm so glad you remembered me." Anna reached out, took Eleanor's hand gently. "Even if you forget, I'll remember for both of us." They sat together that afternoon, two women separated by decades, but united by 1,000 quiet moments that had somehow endured. Eleanor showed her the wall of notes, and Anna read them one by one, smiling, crying, laughing softly at the ones that reminded her of old routines, silly habits, Eleanor's old record player, and the lemon cookies she always burned just slightly. Before she left, Anna wrote a note of her own, the first one on the wall not written by Eleanor's hand. She taped it above the kitchen doorway, where the morning sun would find it. "Dear Firefly, you are still someone's favorite person." When Eleanor read it the next day, she didn't remember who had written it, but she smiled, and her heart felt full, and that was enough. Eleanor had always kept a small writing desk in the corner of her bedroom, one with delicate legs and a drawer that stuck slightly when pulled too fast. It wasn't an heirloom or an antique, just a modest wooden piece she'd purchased decades ago at a church sale. She liked it because it had character. A little uneven, a little worn, but solid like her. The drawer had once been a place for bills, birthday cards, and recipes scribbled on napkins. But over time, it became something else entirely. She discovered its new purpose by accident. One afternoon, after Anna's visit, Eleanor found herself standing in front of the desk, unsure of why she'd come. Her body often moved before her memory caught up, a habit of muscle and instinct. She ran her hand along the smooth wood, hesitated, then opened the drawer. Inside, she found names, written on scraps of paper, envelopes, post-its, torn grocery lists, names, written in her own looping handwriting. Henry, husband, loved jazz, hated mushrooms. Peter, son, lives by the sea, sends postcards in blue ink. Lillian, sister, taught me to braid my hair. Maya, friend, made me laugh until I cried. Some were neatly folded. Others were scribbled quickly, as if afraid the names would slip away before the ink dried. There must have been 50 of them, maybe more. Some had little notes underneath. Met at the corner cafe, wore red gloves. Used to sing in the choir with me. Helped me plant roses in spring '86. Always brought cinnamon bread at Christmas. Eleanor sat down slowly, her knees creaking as she lowered herself into the old chair. She picked up one slip of paper and stared at the name, Amelia. No image came to mind. No voice, no scent, no moment of clarity. But she knew she'd written it, because the handwriting was hers. And something about the name felt soft. Important. She traced the letters with her fingertip. "Amelia," she whispered, tasting the syllables like something sacred. That afternoon, she made a decision. She took a new notebook from the shelf, blue cover, spiral bound, and began to copy each name carefully, one by one. Below each, she wrote everything she could remember. Where they met, what they said, the colors they wore, the way they laughed. Even if the details were vague or incomplete. Henry laughed with his whole face. Held my hand when I had fevers. Called me Elle when no one else did. Peter, tall, thoughtful. Used to bring home seashells when he was 7. I think he liked peppermint. When her memory failed, she didn't panic. She simply wrote what she felt. Amelia, no memory, but I know she mattered. June, name makes my heart ache. Unsure why. Every evening, she added more. Sometimes she only managed one name. Other nights, she filled pages. The act of writing steadied her. It gave shape to the fog. A map, however incomplete, of a world she once lived in. She began to keep the notebook on her nightstand. It became her ritual. Before sleep, she'd read a few names aloud. Not to test her memory, but to speak them into the room, to let them breathe again. One night, she read aloud. Margot, neighbor with a lemon tree, gave me cuttings for my garden. Always smelled of orange blossoms. And as she spoke the name, a scent faint but unmistakable seemed to drift into the room. Citrus. Sunlight. A hot summer day. She smiled. Just a little. Just enough. On the cover of the notebook, she eventually wrote, "The drawer full of names so I don't forget the ones who made me me." When Anna returned weeks later, she found Eleanor dozing in her chair, the notebook open on her lap. Anna picked it up gently and flipped through the pages. She recognized her own name, near the middle. Anna, Firefly, danced in the living room, hated carrots, gave me lavender. Anna smiled, blinking away tears. She didn't wake Eleanor. She just placed a new page in the back of the notebook and wrote, "Eleanor, blue ink, raspberry jam, the safest place I've ever known." Then she added a second line, "If you forget, I will remember." That night, Eleanor opened the notebook and found the new page. She read it 3 times before gently closing it, her hand resting on the cover like it was something living, something holy. She didn't recognize the handwriting, but the words felt true. And that was enough. The mirror in Eleanor's hallway was not grand or ornate. It wasn't gold-rimmed or antique. It had no carvings of ivy or angels, no Baroque flourishes. It was just a simple rectangle, slightly fogged around the edges, framed in pale wood that had faded over time. She had once bought it at a second-hand shop for a handful of coins, not because it was beautiful, but because it was honest. She had placed it in the hallway opposite the kitchen, where morning light could strike it just right and turn the entire corridor into something soft and golden. Over the years, she had passed it countless times on her way to make tea, to write her notes, to answer the door, or to simply exist in the space she called home. But she rarely stopped to look at it. That changed one afternoon in late spring. The sun was pouring in through the living room windows, casting long slanted beams across the carpet. Eleanor was carrying a glass of water, walking slowly toward her notes when she caught a glimpse of something in the mirror, a flicker of movement that made her pause. She turned toward it and stared. The woman in the glass was wearing a pale blue cardigan. Her hair was neatly pinned, though some strands had rebelled. Her shoulders were slightly stooped, but not weak. Her mouth, that mouth, held the faintest curve, like it was halfway between a sigh and a smile. Eleanor stepped closer. She touched her face, first her cheek, then the hollow under her eyes. The mirror followed her exactly, obedient, unflinching. She leaned in, and for the first time in weeks, she truly studied the reflection, not for clues, not to jog her memory, but to meet herself. It was strange, she thought, how she could feel so close to this woman and yet not fully know her. The lines across her brow, had they always been there? The softness around her eyes, was that from laughter or sadness? The woman looked familiar, yes, but more than that, she looked kind, gentle, brave in a way quiet people often are. Eleanor stepped back, just a little, then spoke aloud. "I see you." The mirror did not reply, but somehow, it did. For a long moment, she simply stood there, gazing. She thought of all the days she had passed by without stopping. All the versions of herself that had moved through this house. The young bride, the busy mother, the grieving widow, the woman who forgot names but still left tea for the birds. The mirror had seen them all, and never judged. It had only reflected. That day, Eleanor added a new note. She took one of the blank cards from the basket near the window, picked up her pen, and wrote slowly, deliberately. "This is me. I am still here." She taped it next to the mirror, slightly to the right, where the light would hit it each morning. Then she added a second note, smaller, written in tiny cursive beneath the first. "You do not need to recognize the reflection. You only need to honor it." That night, when Anna came to visit with blueberry muffins and a new photo album, she noticed the note and smiled. "Did you write that today?" she asked, touching the edge of the paper. Eleanor nodded. "I did." Anna hesitated, then reached into her tote bag and pulled out a tiny hand mirror round, with a lavender border. "I brought this for you. For your bedside. Just in case you want to see yourself first thing in the morning. Or before you sleep." Eleanor took it gently, turned it over in her hands. "I'm not sure I always like what I see," she admitted quietly. Anna gave a small laugh, soft and true. "Then don't look for beauty. Look for courage." Eleanor nodded, eyes glistening. Later that evening, as the house grew quiet and the sky turned that familiar evening blue, Eleanor sat on the edge of her bed, holding the mirror in her lap. She didn't look into it. Not yet. Instead, she whispered, "I have been so many women in this life, and I am still learning how to love each one." Then she placed the mirror on the nightstand, beside her drawer of names, beside her notebook of notes. And finally, before drifting into sleep, she added one last thought into the quiet. "I don't have to remember everything to still be someone." It began with a gust of wind, not the kind that howls or shatters, just a sudden, playful breath from the open kitchen window. It slipped in like a child sneaking past bedtime, unnoticed at first, until it touched everything. Eleanor had been asleep in her armchair, her lap blanketed by a half-knitted scarf, the needles resting gently between her fingers. The house was still, except for the soft hum of the radio and the tick of the hallway clock. Outside, rain clouds gathered quietly, gray and unhurried. Then it happened. The breeze danced through the hallway, curling around corners, tugging at curtains, and finally, at the edges of paper. One note lifted from the mirror. Another fluttered from the refrigerator. A third detached from the bedroom door like a leaf in October. By the time Eleanor stirred awake, the house had changed. She sat up slowly, blinking at the sound of paper rustling, not just one piece, but many, dozens. A soft flurry of movement, like wings without birds. She stood, and what she saw stopped her breath. The hallway was no longer lined with reminders. The kitchen door frame, once rimmed with names and affirmations, now stood bare. Her precious map of memory, carefully built, lovingly taped, read aloud each morning, had unraveled. Notes lay scattered on the floor like petals, fragile and lost. Eleanor stepped forward, one foot on a note. It crinkled. She winced. Bending down slowly, she picked up the nearest one. "Tea with honey helps on anxious days." She recognized her handwriting, rounded, careful, blue ink. She reached for another. "You're safe, even when you forget." And another. "Peter, your son, sea blue eyes, hands like his father's." She pressed the paper to her chest. The quiet around her suddenly felt enormous. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. She stood there, surrounded by fragments of her life. Her past selves, organized, determined, trying so hard to hold on, had written these with such faith. And now they had been scattered by something as simple as wind. Eleanor felt her eyes sting. Not because she was angry, not even because she was afraid, but because the sight of all those notes, all that effort to stay grounded, reminded her just how hard she had been trying. Every day, every hour. She sank slowly to the floor. She didn't cry. Not quite. Instead, she sat cross-legged among the papers, picking them up one by one, reading them as if they were old friends arriving all at once for tea. She read aloud to no one in particular. "Margot, lemon tree, orange blossom perfume. You love lilacs because your grandmother did. Even without answers, your presence is enough." Time slipped by. Outside, the rain began. Inside, Eleanor stayed seated on the floor, her notes like a blanket around her. Eventually, the doorbell rang. It was Anna, holding a paper bag with warm bread and a letter tucked inside. She stepped in and gasped softly. "What happened?" Eleanor looked up. The wind. Anna set the bag down and knelt beside her. "Oh well. It's okay," Eleanor said, her voice small but steady. "They're just notes. They were never meant to last forever." Anna paused, looked at the sea of memories, and shook her head gently. "Maybe not forever, but long enough to hold you. Together, they gathered the notes, not to restore them, not to tape them back exactly as they had been, but to read them anew. Some were tucked into the pages of Eleanor's notebook. Others were slipped into the drawer of names. A few were placed under magnets on the fridge, not for order, but for comfort. Before Anna left, she brought out a small box, one she had been saving. "I made this for you," she said, opening the lid. Inside were dozens of blank cards, each one beautifully cut, edged in gold, with room for just a single thought. A new beginning. Next time the wind comes, Anna smiled, "We'll be ready." That night, Eleanor sat at her desk, pen in hand, a fresh card before her. She wrote, "If everything falls apart, that just means it's time to begin again." Then she placed the new note not on the wall, but in the center of the mirror. Because sometimes, we don't need reminders scattered across the house. Sometimes, we just need one steady and honest, staring back at us when we forget who we are. It was a Sunday morning, soft and pale like linen. The birds had returned to the windowsill, chirping in their usual chorus. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, her hands cradling a warm cup of tea. The scent of cinnamon and clove curled upward like a memory trying to form. Everything felt ordinary, but not everything was. That morning, Eleanor found a note on the table, one she didn't remember writing. It was folded neatly, centered like a gift. The paper was the kind she often used. The handwriting looked like hers, but wasn't quite. The loops were just slightly wider, the ink a shade darker than her usual blue. At the bottom, instead of her usual signature dash, there was a tiny heart. Curious, she opened it. "Today is a good day to remember joy, even if you don't remember why." Her breath caught. There was no date, no name, just those two simple sentences, as if someone had whispered them onto the page and left them for the light to find. She looked around the room. Nothing was out of place. The wall of notes had thinned, some intentionally taken down, others lost to time. But this note felt different. She read it again. And this time, her eyes filled with quiet tears. Not sadness, not confusion, but a kind of awe that something so small could feel so vast. She didn't know who had written it. Maybe Anna. Maybe a younger version of herself on a lucid day. Or maybe someone else entirely, a visitor from memory, from grace. But it didn't matter. Because in that moment, Eleanor realized something. For months, she had written notes to herself, to hold on, to remember, to stay grounded. She had fought every slipping thread with ink and intention. But now, maybe it was time to let go of the fight. Not in surrender, but in peace. That day, she did something she hadn't done in a long time. She dressed herself slowly in the lavender blouse she always saved for visitors. She pinned her brooch just so. She brushed her hair and smiled into the mirror, even when she didn't recognize the woman smiling back. And then she walked outside. No plan. No need to bring notes. Just the world and the sky and her breath. She wandered to the park nearby, the one with the pond, where ducks drifted like poems. She sat on a bench beneath the same oak she'd once passed with Peter when he was small. And she simply existed. People walked past. Some smiled. One child waved. And Eleanor, with no paper, no pen, no reminders, smiled back. Later that evening, when Anna stopped by to bring supper, she found the empty teacup on the table, and the note still resting nearby. She picked it up, read it, and smiled. She hadn't written it, but she understood it. She placed the note into Eleanor's drawer of names gently, as if tucking in a child for sleep. When Eleanor returned home, cheeks pink from wind and laughter, she said, "I feel like I met someone today." Anna asked who. Eleanor shrugged. "I'm not sure, but they made me feel whole." Anna only nodded. Maybe it was someone you used to be. That night, Eleanor wrote one last note before sleep. "I may not remember every chapter, but I am still the whole story." She placed it on the nightstand, beside the mirror, beside the drawer. She didn't need the wall anymore, because the memory was no longer just in the notes. It was in her breath, in her stillness, in the people who came and remembered for her. And in the quiet, always, there would be a voice that whispered, "You're here. You were loved. You are still becoming.